Welcome back. Now, the big story from the telecom sector, the government's draft telecom bill, which is now in the public domain for stakeholders to give their feedback, has proposed to regulate communication services offered by over-the-top platforms. That's not all. The draft bill also provides for penalty waiver to telcos on the back of payment defaults under extraordinary circumstances. Additionally, the draft policy also empowers the government to block transmission of certain messages and intercepting communication. So what does this mean for the sector? Well, to discuss this further, I am now joined by Peeyush, Vaish, partner and telecom sector leader of Deloitte India, as well as Jaideep Ghosh, the CEO of Shardul, Amarchand, Mangaldas. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. Peeyush, if I may come to you first, your big takeaways here. I understand it's only been a few hours since it's been out in the public domain, but quickly, what is your understanding of some of the key takeaways, especially the focus that the government appears to be giving on waiver of a lot of these levies in case the company finds itself in some financial distress?
So, Ashwin, thanks. And this was obviously very much expected. I think this is a step in the right direction because I think some of the previous acts were really probably centuries old, and it was time to really repeal some of those acts. And I think this bill is a very welcome bill. I think if you look at the bill, I think there are 3-4 things which are extremely critical and which have really brought a larger gamut of play into this whole piece. The first thing is that it really covers the entire ecosystem. So whether it's the network service providers, whether it's the infrastructure service providers, whether it's the OTT players. So, the OTT players, I think that's been a demand for a long time that the OTT players also need to be in the ambit. And I think this bill really gets that into it. The second thing, which is extremely critical and important, and we've seen a historical trend where we had some challenges in terms of retrospective amendments. So I think this bill really puts that to bury to say that retrospect issues will not arise, which are really detriment to the operators. And in fact, to the extent that they're actually giving a 5-year moratorium from the appointed date in case they have to do any repealment of any act, any statute, etc. Mm-hmm. Third thing, which is extremely important in the bill, is also the fact that any mergers, demergers, acquisitions that are going to happen. I think from that perspective, you only need to intimate the licensing authority, and obviously other acts like the Companies Act, etc., will fall in place. So I think overall, I think it's a very welcome move. And I think all the operators should be quite happy with it and the entire ecosystem. And I think we'll wait for the bill to get enacted shortly.
Indeed. In fact, we reached out to the COAI. What they tell us is that they're still studying the bill and they'll get back to us with a formal comment. But while they do that, Mr. Ghosh, let me come to you now. There are a couple of interesting issues that have also emerged. Number one is that we find, firstly, very clearly specified, coded in the law, that spectrum is not the only route, that allocation of spectrum can also take place under this new regime that is being proposed. Your quick take on that? That has been a very contentious issue since 2012 2G verdict.
Yeah, firstly, thanks for having me here on your show, Ashmit. And this, bill and someday this would, in some form, will be an act is definitely, updates all the 1885 to 1950 acts. Now, coming to the specific point that you've asked me, I think, yes, on spectrum allocation we have seen it largely through the auction route, but this administrative mechanism has been included and defined with reasonable clarity, which is a part of the theme which I understood from this draft bill, that, it strengthens the power of the central government across different elements of the telecom, operations of in India. So this really gives government flexibility to administrative fashion, in an administrative fashion, allocate spectrum. The only thing I would like to mention is that, there's a list in the draft act in terms of in which situation or to which all kinds of organizations can spectrum be assigned without an auction. The interesting element I saw is that, some agencies, including BSNL, MTNL, are also included there. But I think this, for other organizations like, space or defense, that gives a fair bit of clarity. So overall, it's okay as long as, it's exercised in a cautious and careful manner over a period of time. Back to you, Ashmit.
Sure. Peeyush, if I may come to you again, you mentioned as one of the key takeaways being that the OTT players, the likes of WhatsApp, Signal, Telegram, will now also be under this regulatory ambit. The question I want to ask you is, will this change be welcomed or will it be contested because it brings with it a bag of compliances as well?
You have to understand one thing, Ashmi, that the government is very clear that there is no compromise on the national security. And if you really look at the theme of this bill, in multiple places in the draft bill, they've really spoken about national security and the interests of the people and the public. At any point of time, I think one of the things that they've also mentioned in the bill is the fact that any services provided which are in the nature of telecommunication services should be verifiable in terms of the subscriber who's actually performing those, who's actually doing those services. So I think from that perspective, I think anything that really calls for national security interest, I think that will obviously be welcomed by all the players in this market, no matter whether it's the WhatsApps or the Telegrams of the world or the telecom operators. And I think we've seen that over the past many years where the telecom operators now religiously as a practice follow all the rules of the game in terms of IDs, etc. So I think it's a question of getting that well drafted and a process how it's going to get carried out. So I don't think there should be any concern for anybody.
Sure. We're running out of time. Mr. Jaideep Ghosh, final question to you. Again, just borrowing from some of the comments that were made by Peeyush on the question of compliances. Let's also keep in mind that as far as national security is concerned, that has again been very clearly codified as a part of this new draft, and it very clearly says that the government will have the power to either block transmission of any or a certain class of messages or to even intercept. The justification, of course, is national security, public order, sovereignty of the nation. Is that something that perhaps could be prone to challenge? The reason I ask is because companies like WhatsApp have clearly been saying that, look, our communications are encrypted on both ends. We cannot intercept them even if we want to.
See, there are a few elements, as I was hinting in the previous response to your previous. There are a few elements in which the central government has been mentioned as to have an authority, including not only what you said, also to waive off or to delay, in case of payment defaults under exceptional circumstances or the public emergency or national security. So these are subject to deliberations, and let's wait for next 4 weeks to see how does the consultation happen and how does the industry and the stakeholders respond. And I think we'll take a view that yes, in principle, some of these are likely to be kind of, if not contested, at least deliberated, that in which situation and can such powers be exercised by the government. National security definitely yes, but there is a mention of extraordinary circumstances in more than one place. So we have to see how that gets interpreted. So we'll probably see how the consultation process goes, Ashmet.
Indeed, Mr. Vaish, Mr. Ghosh, thank you so much for joining us with your valuable time, insight and perspective. It will be an exciting 30 days ahead for the telecom space. October 20th is the deadline for submitting one's comments and as well as submissions as far as the draft telecom bill is concerned. But that, unfortunately, is all the time that we have for. It's a wrap on this edition of the News Centre. Thanks so much for watching. News and updates continue right here.